A young man with blonde hair is sitting in a prison cell. Suddenly, he hears someone approaching and calling his name. The boy grabs the stranger's hand and asks who it is and how he knows him. The girl with blonde hair says with some awkwardness that she is a fairy, but the guy looks at her with a stone face, so the stranger wonders if it was that unexpected. Such he was not a friendly boy, however, 6 years later. The guy himself takes the protagonist's hand and tells her that he missed his fairy. The girl is so embarrassed by this that her heart almost jumps out of her chest. She offers the young man to let go of her hands, but he innocently says that he does not want to, because the lady will immediately go to the world of fairies. The lady with silver hair cries out, "What is he talking about?" Because in childhood he did not believe in all this. The guy replies that he couldn't be honest back then. He pulls the main character closer to him, wraps his arms around her waist, and claims that she is beautiful. There's no way the lady isn't a fairy. The young man asks if he's right. The girl cries out in embarrassment that he's doing it on purpose. This guy has changed a lot in those 6 years. One day, the protagonist saw a note on the table in which it was written that she did not forget to take the medicine, although the line of action has already expired, but it is a pity to throw away. So the one who wrote the letter offered her to drink it. The girl asked if she is the waste disposal section, but she has long been accustomed to such treatment and think that it's no big deal that the line has expired. The protagonist realizes that no one is coming back anyway and decides to go to bed. But when she lies down in bed and is already preparing to sleep, then her stomach begins to hurt, not on a joke. The girl grasps it. Before she started to lose consciousness, it was a normal night, but when the girl woke up, the first thing she saw was a blonde woman who tried to plunge the girl into eternal sleep and screamed that she would not forgive her. There was only one question in the protagonist's mind. Who was that? It was a world from a literary work. The first emperor of the Barian Empire, Pleiada de Barian, was an elf who possessed 2 miracles, creation and healing. He fell in love with a human woman, and they had a child. Barians were born with magical abilities, but perhaps because of the mixture with human blood, the descendants were not strong in them. Therefore, the descendants of the dragon, Chiron, targeted them. To keep his descendants safe, Pleiada transferred his power to the second ruler, the second in turn to the third, and the third to the fourth. This is how the succession continued, and now 3,000 years on the system holds. There are 2 princesses in Barian. One is named Helen, and she was born with identical magical powers as the first ruler. Another was named Lyra, and she didn't have an ounce of magic. The protagonist really doesn't know the reason why, but she turned out to be that heroine. Now, the white-haired lady is sitting at the table and listening to the humiliation from the other ladies. One of them claims that the girl is being reckless as always, and she even feels sorry for her. The second lady claims that there is nothing to be done because the little girl has inherited bad blood and is dressed in such rags. The brunette asks if she's even ashamed. The protagonist wonders if they can't keep their mouths shut because she's sick of it. The blonde argues that it is useless because the girl lives without her mother in a separate palace. The young lady realizes that this woman does not even hide her dislike. One of the ladies says that Her Highness is indeed merciful. The blonde at this time tells her children to take care of Her Majesty's seed and not to exclude them from her circle, but the protagonist in her thoughts asks them to stay away. The brunette asks if that was right, and if it is even possible to call someone who has absolutely no magic and who also has no green eye color, Her Majesty's seed. The young lady is shocked at such insolence, and the pink-haired lady with a smile on her face states with a smile on her face that it was rude and shouldn't have been said in the presence of Princess Lyra. The girl looking at her face realizes that it says otherwise. The brunette says that maybe they don't understand it. It's natural to question the world. She claims that her daughter Odelia, who has great inquisitiveness, will soon be the treasure of the country. But Her Highness proposes to close the subject of the seed. She looks with coldness at the protagonist and says that she is not drinking tea today, and after all, she prepared it especially for the girl. The blonde asks if baby girl could you taste it. The white-haired lady looks at her mug with tea and agrees. She so does not want to do it, but will have to agree. Lyra drinks this strange liquid in a gulp, and the other ladies claim that she doesn't even have manners that match her status. The girl does not understand what was poured in this mug at all, but at the same moment a piece of cake flies into her. The protagonist turns around and sees a guy who looks like Her Highness. He says that he thought to treat the little girl, but did not calculate his strength. The blonde man uses magic to make the cakes float and claims that she doesn't understand anything anyway because she doesn't possess magic. The girl with pink hair admires the guy's ability. The little girl says it's very interesting and she wants to do it too, but the blonde says she can't. The girl claims that she is also from the royal family. Of course, she can't like Helen's little sister, but the cake will be able to bullet Lyra. The protagonist thinks the cake isn't needed to throw it. Her Highness turns to Tyrone and Angelina and tells them to be friendly since they are brother and sister. The white-haired lady wonders in her mind if she is part of the family too. The little ones obey Her Highness. And the blonde lady turns to Princess Lyra, who is still covered in leftover cake. Her Highness asks how much longer the girl will sit in those clothes and advises her to change her clothes soon. The protagonist is furious as she ponders who caused all of this to happen. She thanks the woman and asks to be allowed to depart. When the girl enters on the way, she yells about how annoyed everyone is with her. The little girl asks if they think they can get away with it. They throw a cake at her using magic. If the first ruler found out about this, he would definitely tell them off. The young lady imagines what would happen if the whole family got together. The little girl treads on the road and talks to herself. When she read about such strife in the book, it was quite interesting. But in fact, in real life, it is quite the opposite. If you think back on it like that, Lyra from the book was originally not in her lifetime, but what caused her death. The protagonist recalls that once in this world, someone tried to deprive her of oxygen. Perhaps it was an attempt to take her life. Well, she doesn't know the details. The girl looks at the table where the meal is being held and points her hand at it. A magic circle appears under it. From this, a strong wind begins to blow on the tea party table. All the food from the table begins to fly away. The blonde turns around and you see that the cake stand is already collapsing on him. All the servants run excitedly to the gentleman. The butler shrieks for someone to call security immediately. The boy sits on the ground, covered in cake, and screams that this can't be happening and it's definitely someone's magic. But Odelia suggests her brother to think carefully, because only Her Majesty and her sister Helen can possess such strong magic. A girl with pink hair is crying because her dress is ruined. The protagonist sits in the bushes and giggles, for the hour of retribution has come. She folds her hands, and in a second, they have a magic circle. The girl does not understand why she, who is not capable of magic, became its owner. The young lady thinks that there must be a reason for it, and the main thing is to keep it a secret. She decides not to think about it and goes for a bath and then meets with Pian. After bathing, Lyra uses teleportation magic. It's always so cold in this place, so she uses magic and creates an exquisite lamp. It made it brighter, but looking at the candles, the girl realizes that it somehow doesn't fit this place. Suddenly, she hears a rustle behind her. The protagonist claims that the guy scared her and asks if he woke her up. She also apologizes and says that it was just dark. The guy with silver hair says she smells awful. The babe sniffs herself and doesn't understand why. After all, she was swimming. But the young man claims that he is not talking about the stench, but the smell of poison. The meeting of the protagonist, Helen and Pian, in the book, The Dragon and the Empire, took place on the ruins of the House of Hired. The servant of the girl claimed that the entire territory of the ducal House of Hired is destroyed. He tells the princess that he understands everything, but there is no living soul left there. But the girl hears rustling coming from the ruins. She uses magic and lifts heavy stones. There's still a human underneath them. The princess states that it is good that she found him. The girl creates a magic circle and states with a warm smile that she will now patch up the young man. Pian had been living locked up for 6 years, and Helen, who saved him, unable to control his dragon power, was his light, savior, and first love. But it wasn't just Pian who was obsessed with Helen. Also the black dragon Paris and the blue dragon Daniel. Their desire to get Helen created a feud between Barian and Chiron. In the end, only Pian remained near the heroine, and he, who was protecting, looked only at her, died in a fight with another dragon. The main heroine, who read this work, was disappointed. She cried out whether the author mocked and why he chose Pian. It is her favorite character, the only one of its kind, the heir of a devilish family, and even handsome. The girl wondered why he wasn't the main character. After her character died, the protagonist abandoned the book. Thus, this work had already begun to fade from memory, and then they meet. The boy asks if Lyra is listening to him at all, and repeats his words about the smell of poison. When the girl is distracted from her thoughts, she says that it's because of the incident with the tea, but assures the boy that everything is fine and she will live. She takes his face in her hand and tells him to tell her how he is. The girl looks at the bruises. The young lady had healed him recently, after all, and again the wounds. Even though this is a written work, to abuse a child like this and keep him locked up for 6 years is unacceptable. Lyra uses healing magic and all the boy's wounds disappear. She says she's done and asks if there are any more places that hurt. But Pian asks why the girl doesn't get her poison out, and the protagonist replies that she's not capable of such a thing. The boy looks angrily at Lyra, and we notice his displeased face. It is understandable because she lied about the fairy, but she should not reveal herself. Pian claims that the young lady doesn't know if she can do it and urges her to try. The little girl puts her hand on the boy's head and strokes it. She asks if Pian is worried about her and says that he is a good boy. The young man is embarrassed at such words and wraps himself in a blanket and lies down facing the wall. He claims that it makes no difference to him. The protagonist realizes that he seems to have taken offense. In the book, he had a cooler personality, so the young lady ponders whether he has changed because Pian is now a child. Lyra strokes the boy's back and wishes him a good night. After she leaves, the young man relaxes a bit and says that the girl treats him like a child. The white-haired lady sighs. She is pleased that the boy takes care of her, but she can't cure herself, even if she really wants to, because she is bound to be sick tomorrow. The next day, the little girl feels very bad. She doesn't understand what the blonde girl has mixed in there. The lady who mixed it all comes into the room. She says that she sees that the girl is having a hard time and says that she will give them trouble if she falls asleep quickly in her last sleep. She puts her hand on Lyra's neck and tells her to feel all the pain. She then turns to the maid, orders her to bring the medicine and leaves, telling the princess to rest. After taking the medicine, the protagonist realizes that it doesn't help and she gets worse and worse. The young lady looks around and doesn't notice anyone. So she decides to use the magic of healing on herself, and it becomes much easier after all, health for a person in the first place. If she knew how to pretend like a professional, she wouldn't have to go through so much agony. The girl was really scared. Her Highness immediately noticed that she was only pretending. The woman got rid of those who supposedly helped her and finished off the innocent. From that moment on, everyone began to avoid Lyra. But it's better for her. The white-haired lady decides to go for a swim. She immerses herself in a warm bath and with the help of a magic circle adds rose petals to it. The girl thinks I can treat myself every time. Rebirth is unrealistic as it is. And then there's the magic. The sky she sees, the taste she tastes, and even the pain she feels. It's all real, but in some ways it's still like a dream. The biggest question arises about Lyra herself. Wind magic and displacement, healing and creation, why on earth, with all of that, did she continue to endure the abuse? If she had left the Empire, she wouldn't have had to suffer so much, though perhaps she only gained such power after being reborn. The protagonist is so used to magic by now, and she wonders if her past family regrets her and if the concept of love is even pressed into this imperial family at all. Lyra's mother, the 7th princess, was long ago deprived of life. From her father, not a word. What regret there is. And yet the scene the young lady saw once she got here could be connected to everything else. The princess puts her hand on her neck and realizes that they are all strangers to her, and she will not be eaten up by guilt. If the girl stays here, all they will do is make fun of her, so she decides that she will leave. Lyra can use magic, so there will be no problems with money, and she will be able to take care of herself. The main character has already dried her hair with magic, but what really worries the little girl is Pian. The young man sits and looks at the exquisite lamp that Lyra put in the prison and claims that she has no taste at all. At this time, the little girl is using magic to leap the walls of Barian's palace. In her hands, she holds a heart-shaped piece of jewelry. The little girl claims she stole the piece so easily and wonders if the guards there are too lax or if she is the one who is too good at magic. The little girl looks at the jewelry and thinks how beautiful it is, just like a jewel. But she realizes that now is not the time to look at it, and she has to get to Pian quickly. When the protagonist teleports to the ducal palace, she sees a woman screaming at the servants not to give the boy any more water because he is an unbearable child and where the lamp came from. The Duchess throws it on the floor and asks who brought it here. Lyra stands around the corner and realizes it was her, and the woman bites her nails and says that instead of weakening, the young man is flourishing and someone is definitely watching over him. The maid argues that this can't be the case, as they wouldn't have such a person in their house. But the protagonist in her hiding place raises her hand, for she is that very person. The woman says that everyone calls him the heir. If she gives birth to a son, they will quickly get rid of him. The lady in red wishes that Pian would sooner fall into eternal sleep and contemplates the option of bringing in an undead man who has passed away from this very disease. The maid appeals to her mistress, for this is too much, and the latter claims she knows and said it for nothing. The Duchess leaves, clenching her fists, and the protagonist hopes that she will not return and opens the cage with her friend. But what she sees leaves her in shock. Pian is lying on the floor, his entire body covered in wounds and red liquid dripping from his head. The girl runs up to the young man and asks if he's all right. He struggles to open his eyes and says with a sad expression that the lamp has been taken away. The white-haired lady, already with tears in her eyes, shouts that she doesn't care about the lamp because she can create as many of them as she wants. The girl thinks that she is a fool because she didn't think about the fact that if he is without wounds, it will look strange and continued to treat him. The little girl is already reaching out to the guy, but stops herself. If she heals him now, the Duchess will come and beat him again. The protagonist ponders whether the number of injuries were increasing because of her, because she was healing them. Pian pulls the protagonist to him and encloses her in an embrace. The guy claims that he is very glad because the white-haired lady no longer smells of poison, and tears continue to pour from Lyra's eyes. She does not understand why the young man should tolerate such an attitude because of her. The girl already does not care about the story on the work and this aunt. She will no longer let him offend. With the help of healing magic, the princess patches up his wounds. After that, the little girl offers him an escape. But the young man does not understand how they can do this, so the protagonist holds out to him a piece of jewelry in the shape of a heart. The girl asks if he feels anything, and Pian asks if he should. Lyra is immersed in her thoughts. She comes up with 3 ways for them to escape. The first is to just run away. The girl is already imagining how she will say goodbye to everyone and tell them that she hopes they never see each other again. This is the most convenient option for her. However, so the protagonist will take away the future of Pian, he will not be able to inherit the title of Duke afterwards. The second plan is to give power to the young man. That's why the white-haired lady stole this thing for him, the heart of a silver dragon. It is needed to increase the dragon's power. Bariana, afraid of Chiron's power, hid it for herself. But Pian hasn't transformed like a dragon yet, so this thing doesn't work. The third plan is to mess with the aunt who is hurting the boy by placing the dragon's heart with her and making her look guilty of stealing it. When they find out about it, Tony will just leave it at that. No matter how much of a duchess she is, there will be punishment. The princess understands that it will be difficult to organize everything, but the scheme will work, and the result will be not bad, but what will become of Pian and Helen. 6 years later, they will not be able to meet, if the girl will now save him. So the protagonist turns to the young man and asks him what he wants, but he does not understand what Lyra is talking about. The girl begins to list various options, such as to take revenge on that aunt, or quietly, peacefully live in a remote village, and perhaps he wants to become a knight of a beautiful princess. The protagonist recalls a picture from the novel because there the guy was protecting Helen. But the young man asks why a night at once, the white-haired lady claims to say, for example. Lyra says that the guy can ask anything he wants and the fairy will fulfill everything. Pian claims that the girl immediately starts talking about the fairy when she doubts. The little girl tries to justify herself and says that she is indeed a fairy, and she thinks how witty he is. After a short thought, the young man says that now he wants to go with his mother to see the Chiron. But the little girl remembers the words of the Duchess, how she wishes that the guy would sooner pass away, as well as his mother. Lyra apologizes, since she can't revive people. But the guy confidently says that his mother is alive and just sleeping for 1 year. The protagonist does not understand what he is talking about. The young man continues and says that a normal person would have passed away, but his mom has dragon blood flowing, so such a disease is not life-threatening. The white-haired lady thinks how good it is that his mother is alive and tells the boy not to talk about such sad things. Lyra takes his hand and claims that then he won't have to think of anything and she will wake up his mom. The protagonist, with a bright smile on her face, says that in return, Pian should become happy. The boy is confused by such words. The protagonist, meanwhile, says that it is settled then and asks the boy to show where his mom is. The young boy claims that her room is the farthest one on the 2nd floor, whereupon the girl uses teleportation magic. She enters the room and notices that it is very strange because the Duchess's bedroom is so gloomy. When the girl goes a little deeper into the room, she sees a beautiful woman with black hair. The young lady cannot admire her. I do not understand how it is possible to cheat on such a beautiful wife. The protagonist uses healing magic, but unfortunately nothing happens, so she decides to use magic again, but more carefully. After that again, nothing happens, and Lyra already starts shaking the brunette, but the woman still does not wake up. The next day, the protagonist is in her room and thinks how she would decipher it and whether her magic is weak. But Pian was affected yesterday. The girl remembers that she forgot about that evil aunt, and she will again abuse the young man today. She had better do it yesterday and run away. The maid informs the little girl that Helen has arrived to see the princess. The protagonist recalls the moment when they tried to deprive her of oxygen, and such memories make her headache. Lyra doesn't recall seeing the princess before, but she doesn't understand why it feels like they've already met. The blonde claims that her condition is not good. The white-haired lady assures that everything is fine and she got the medicine, so she thanks her sister for her concern. But the blonde fiercely says that if the girl really doesn't want to fall into an eternal sleep, she shouldn't ever call her sister again. The young lady gets a little scared, and Helen leaves and tells the protagonist not to get in her face again because she's annoying. Lyra is shocked. She doesn't realize what that was even about. The princess herself came to her and then asks her to stay out of her sight. Is Helen really Helen? Well, at least she outwardly resembles the main character. Clever and bossy, she is the most suitable for the role of a ruler. But the white-haired lady does not remember that she had such a character and wonders if there is a catch. But it could be because of her, because in the book, Helen changed after her younger sister passed away. Perhaps because Lyra is alive, these changes are not seen. It's likely that Pian will become more cunning as well. That's certainly not a bad thing. But the protagonist tries to push these thoughts away from her, because now is not the time to think about it. She has to find a way to wake up Pian's mom. Her complexion is definitely better, and her breathing is restored. But the girl does not understand why she does not wake up, and it may not be magic. The white-haired lady uses teleportation magic and moves to the Duchess's estate. She once again tries to use healing magic on the woman. Nothing happens, just like yesterday. But the little girl decides that she will definitely not give up today. The protagonist says she can't say she fully understands the woman's feelings, but she imagines how much pain she was in. The princess continues to heal her and says she shouldn't stop there because she has Pian. The Duchess clutches the sheet with her hand, and Lyra claims that the woman who runs the palace now is abusing him, and the young man is now locked in a dungeon, not being given proper food. They want him to die of his illness. The young lady claims he needs the Duchess, so she asks her to wake up and come to her son. The woman does wake up and tearfully asks if her son is okay now. The little girl is happy that the young man's mom is awake and says that she was able to do it. The white-haired lady states that he is alive and well at the moment. She also asks how the brunette is feeling. The Duchess says that since yesterday, all the pain has gone away. However, she was scared to open her eyes and face reality. Lyra realizes that the magic did work yesterday after all. It's just that the woman herself didn't want to wake up. The Duchess rises and asks if the girl knows about the dragon engraving. The young lady says that in general, yes, judging by the artwork, it's a vow that speaks of eternal love. There was such a thing between Pian and Helen in the book. A player can only make a vow once in a lifetime. Pian's mother, as a human from Chiron, has the same characteristic. It was natural for her to love one person and live her whole life with him. The girl remembers that even in the book, the other dragons paid all their attention to only one Helen. It's not the dragons have something wrong, it's just that they, humans, don't accept it because the human heart can grow cold in an instant and sometimes even love more than two people. Unreciprocated feelings destroy the hearts of dragons. Yes, even now, when the brunette remembers the betrayal of her husband, it becomes so bad that she wants to end it all. And the worst thing is that under all circumstances, she continues to love him. When the protagonist read the book, she thought it was very romantic. On the other hand, everything is not so rosy. The little girl tries to support the woman and puts her arm around her. A little while later, the two girls go out on the balcony. The Duchess apologizes because she only sobbed in front of the girl, but she feels better. The woman says that the little girl is right. She has something to protect, and she has no right to run away. So as Pian wants, she will go with him to Chiron. The young lady is very happy about this. She bows and thanks Madame Berylene for her decision. When the girl calls her by name, the Duchess states that it is a great nostalgia for her and says that she is the one who should be thanking the little girl. The woman also asks why the white-haired lady is rescuing them, how she knew they were in a predicament and where the girl is from, as she definitely has potential in magic. The Duchess also asks questions about the little girl's parents and if she has a boyfriend. Lyra, on the other hand, tries to extricate herself from the situation and claims that she is a fairy who has come to fulfill Pian's every wish. But the woman looks at the girl the same way her son did when he first heard it. The Duchess states that if the little girl has no desire to answer who she will no longer ask, and the white-haired lady notices that mother and son are an exact copy of each other. The brunette asks the girl to say at least a name, and Lyra slowly moves to the edge of the balcony until she jumps over the fence, when she is already in flight, then claims that she had urgent business. After that, the girl successfully returned the jewelry to its place, because Madeline woke up, and now Pian is not threatened by anything. Even if this lady was asleep, it doesn't mean that she is weak at all. If the boy starts to train, Lyra won't be able to see him as before, but he will live a happy life, and that's the main thing. The white-haired lady almost dances with joy and realizes that it's time for her to think how to get out of this place. The main character wonders where she would go. She doesn't know anything about this area, so the girl decides to look for guidebooks. The little girl comes to the library. The first book she picks up is called Unusual Dishes of the Entire Continent. This book describes a lot of delicious food and places to try it. The protagonist assumes that the book can be created too, then she won't have to memorize it. The young lady creates a magic circle and from it a second book appears. She really has everything. But suddenly Lyra hears a voice behind her, and when she turns around she sees two girls. One of them says that the young lady is in the way. They both have green eyes and that means they are from an imperial family. One of them the little girl saw at a tea party. Lyra worries that they might have seen her using magic. The girl with curls asks why the white-haired lady is looking at them like that and claims she looks funny. And the other girl claims that Lyra doesn't know the simple rules of behavior in the library, and the problems with ignorance concerned her mother too, because she tried to poison her sister Helen. The protagonist is surprised by this, for her mother tried to poison Helen herself. Almost nothing was written about Lyra's mother of the book. However, it is known that of all the 13 princesses, she is the only commoner. The woman was favored by the emperor, but she was executed for her crime. The young lady ponders whether these crimes were an attempt to finish off the protagonist. The girl with curls claims that she remembered, and Helen was definitely in danger then, and she drank what the woman gave her. The white-haired lady realizes that that's why her sister treated her rudely that time, but on the other hand, there is no proof that the girls are telling the truth, and something is definitely wrong here. The little girl realizes that it is too early to believe their words. Odelia suggests her friend to leave because they can get infected by this nasty character. It pisses the protagonist off to no end. Suddenly she hears someone's voice. A man with a book in his hands says that it's quite strange because the girls have the same blood, but they forget about it, and it's unfortunate. Lyra remembers that she has seen this clothing, atmosphere, and manner of speech somewhere before. This is Emperor Christopher de Beriana. The man asks if the girl wants him to punish her abusers. The white-haired lady, meanwhile, remembers that he is not a good man either. Christopher became emperor by strengthening ties with aristocratic families, so he has 13 wives. So he continues to maintain his status as emperor, but he can do nothing himself, so he only had to watch as his favorite woman is plunged into eternal sleep. Lyra certainly feels sorry for him, but if he could not save even one woman, then she should not hope for help from his side. So the protagonist claims that she does not want to drag His Highness into problems, and the man says that she is becoming more and more like a mother. The little girl claims to be her daughter after all. Christopher says that is also true and asks how her heart is. The protagonist doesn't know what he's talking about and claims that it seems to be working, and wonders if she's ever had heart problems. The emperor steps in a little closer and says that's good and moves closer to the girl. Lyra can now see his face at close range. If you examine closer, he is so handsome after all. The elven emperor is so handsome. The man puts his hand on the girl's head and tells her to be more careful, but the protagonist doesn't know what he's talking about. Meanwhile, His Highness pulls a copy of a book made with magic from behind her back and states that it will be problematic if her power is unlocked, so she'd better wait still for her time to come. Christopher then leaves, and the little girl is left alone with her thoughts. She ponders if he saw everything or if he already knew. The girl decides that now is not the time to look at the guidebooks and has to run away. When she gets home, she quickly gathers all her things. A lot it can create, so there isn't much stuff, but she decides to check again to see if everything is in place. She rummages through her closet and finds a toy whale. It seems beautiful, and Lyra doesn't understand why it was lying so neatly in her closet. Suddenly, a memory appears in her head as a lady gave her this whale. The little girl does not understand what it was and whether it is some kind of magic or just Lyra's memories, but decides that it is better to take the toy with her. After that, the protagonist comes to the prison where she always met Pian, but now there was no one there because Madeline woke up, so Pian is not there. The girl ponders where she can find her friend now, but when she turns around, she sees him. Lara says that it suits him very well and asks why he is still here, and he replies with a slight blush on his face that he thought his friend would come here. The white-haired lady says what a good boy Pian is after all. The white-haired lady says what a good boy Pian is. The young man asks her to come out of there, as he doesn't want to be here and would rather go for a walk. When they have already come to the garden, the young lady asks if the boy will go with his mother to Chiron. She realizes that she ruined the coolest pairing, but still, if she wants Pian to live on, that she needs to avoid seeing Helen. The young man asks if the girl wants to go with him. It often snows in Chiron, so it's very beautiful there, lots of cute animals, and the people there are very friendly. The kid will definitely like it there. The main character realizes that he is trying to lure her. Very beautiful means that the whole year will be cold, and a lot of cute animals speaks of the same number of demons. The phrase about friendly inhabitants means that they do not like outsiders. The young lady thanks him for the invitation, but refuses. The young lady claims that she too is leaving the place, and the guy asks where she is going. The protagonist claims she is heading to the world of fairies, but it doesn't work, and the young man doesn't believe her. Pian asks her savior to tell at least a name, and An realizes how screwed she is. If with normal magic the descendants of the elves move using numbers, the dragon can already just say the name of the person they want to move to. It came out rather unbalanced on the author's part in regards to the characters, as the dragons only have to know the name when they answer their call. This serves as a sort of promise that they are always welcome. The problem, after all, is that this is how personal space is lost. The little girl doesn't mind telling him her name. It can bring danger, and sometimes she may unconsciously respond, so she decides not to say her name for anything. The little girl asks why it's so important for Pian to know, since he can call her a fairy. The boy claims he's never called her that and doesn't want to, but the white-haired lady claims she wants to. The young man says he can't even send letters, and to the fairy world even less so, and Lyra is touched by this and asks if he will write her letters. Then she decides that he can send to the room where the Duchess lived for the first time, and she will come and get them. After a brief pause, Pian asks if the white-haired lady will come to him. To this, the protagonist, with a smile on her face, replies, yes. After a moment of silence, the guy says the name Alice, but the girl doesn't understand what he's talking about. Then the guy starts to list various female names, and the girl thinks how persistent he is. Now the protagonist is talking to the saleswoman at Noelle's outlet. The woman thanks her for her visit to their store and shows her the proposed product is a soul of a sea witch, brought from Atlantis. The jewelry has a brilliant color. In thought, the woman adds that it is so expensive that no one buys it, and states that it would suit a white-haired lady perfectly. The saleswoman, you think to yourself, is sure to sell this stone today, because this lady looks like the kind of person who would buy it if I were to chip in. The girl thinks about it and says it's beautiful, but why would she want it, since she already has a lot of jewelry? The woman says that if the little girl thinks this jewel is just like the others, she is deeply mistaken, for this stone contains the memories of a sea witch. There is a magic on Atlantis that allows you to encase sad feelings in stone, thus getting rid of them. The sadder the memories, the brighter the stone glows. Lyra asks why they call it a soul instead of a memory. The saleswoman assures her that they say that memories make up the soul, which is probably why it's called that. For the girl, as one who has been reborn in another world, these words have a deep meaning. The woman states that if the girl takes the jewelry today, she will discount it. Ruby from the Rose Mountain, from the Gloria Kingdom, as well as the Mare Kingdom's family jewel, Blue Tears, are very beautiful, but the Sea Witch's soul is no match for them. Suddenly, the protagonist hears the sound of a piano. She looks at the guy playing the melody, and the saleswoman asks if he really plays well, because thanks to him, she gets in the mood to work. The last pianist broke his leg, and the young man came to replace him. He is very popular with the customers. Then the little girl pokes her finger in the direction of the musician and states that she will buy this. The woman is a little puzzled by such words. She apologizes and says that the guy is not their property, but if the girl wishes, she can recommend slave traders. Lyra, on the other hand, states suspiciously that she was talking about the piano. The saleswoman gets nervous and assures her that she thought so. It's just that they have special services for guests. But this is a pure lie. The woman says that if the white-haired lady is interested in the piano, she can show her the rest of the musical instruments as well. But the protagonist interrupts her and claims that she'll buy the soul of a sea witch and a ruby from some mountain and a blue tear too. And if there's anything else she wants to sell, let her do it. Lyra says she'll buy it all. The saleswoman's eyes light up at that. She thanks the little girl and states that the piano will be a gift. The young lady assures her it's not necessary, it's a commission system. The girl places a chest overflowing with coins in front of the woman and asks if she can pay all at once. The woman, of course, agrees. Lyra says she's coming to pick up the piano a little later, and the saleswoman says they'll look forward to it. The young man who is playing the piano escorts the white-haired lady away with a look. Now the protagonist is in Noelle's mansion. She examines the stone and realizes that it seems to be more than just a jewel indeed. In the time since her rebirth, the young lady has realized that Lyra's magic is far from perfect. The girl cannot create something living and something that has magic in it. She can only create what Lyra has seen with her own eyes. That's why she can't create a smartphone or a computer. The little girl enjoys her drink and says that if there is money, almost everything is solvable. She tosses a stone somewhere back and states that still, that in life, that in the book, money plays a significant role. At first, she spent all day creating coins. They can almost always be used. Yes, basically everyone loves money. You feel many times more confident with them. However, there were strange rumors about some girl going around and spending money left and right. One of the girls said that a girl with silver hair and violet eyes was throwing money around, and the other claimed that she heard that the owner of a bakery store had changed his life after meeting her. As a result, strange people began to squint at Lyra. There was a great variety of them. The girl managed all of them, so there were no problems. But the white-haired lady was extremely unpleasant. There will be problems if the rumors reach the Imperial, so it's time for her to wrap it up, and she's already tired of shopping. The little girl remembers that the night market is opening tonight and decides to go and gather information. When she arrives at the noisy market, she is immediately offered to buy a book. The little girl looks at this stall. Suddenly, she notices a familiar image of a whale. It says that the name of this creature is Marmel. It is a magical creature that lights up the entire empire of Atlantis. The protagonist thought that it is an ordinary whale, but the seller, meanwhile, is surprised that the little girl knows the language of Atlantis, because this book is written in this language, and the girl read everything so easily. Lyra looks at the book and realizes that the letters are really different, and the man continues to talk. He asks where the girl learned this language, because none of the buyers could not translate the text of this book, and it is so rare. The little girl is a little puzzled by this. She didn't expect the ability to understand this language to be so valuable, but she doesn't need to stand out anymore, so she claims it was just thinking out loud. The man is a little upset. He claims he was hoping to learn more about Marmel. After all, his dream is to see Marmel with his own eyes. He has no idea how beautiful this creature is. But seeing a whale is nearly impossible. Lyra remembers a girl handing her a toy in the shape of Marmel. The two boys are in the Chiron Empire, a training ground. They are looking for Pion, as the training is about to start and the boy is still missing. The young man, however, is sitting in the bushes right behind them. One of the guys says that he must have run away out of fear, and the other says that you can't say that about a non-imperial family member because it's not a long way to prison. The red-haired guy asks how that weakling from Bariana can be a member of an imperial family. Even his 8-year-old brother will when better than him. The young boy also adds that Pion should have stayed in Bariana because they don't need such weaklings. The lad asks if his friend thinks Mrs. Madeline is mad at him. Otherwise, why would she be so hard on her son? And the friend tells him to stop, because if anyone hears, the boy will be in trouble. The two friends leave and leave Pion alone with his thoughts. Suddenly, he hears a painfully familiar voice. It's Lyra. She says that they haven't seen each other for a long time and asks how the guy is doing. But he only shrieks in the sense that it's been a year since they've seen each other. The protagonist apologizes and states that it's hard to teleport to a place you haven't been. Yes, and it's hard to get to Chiron in general. The boy says he sent letters to that room. Lyra states that the Duke decided to clean up there. He really didn't like the guy and his mom leaving there. The white-haired lady suggests that he'd better tell him why he's hobbling around, since those boys were looking for him. The young man assures that he doesn't hack, he just doesn't like going to classes, but the main character thinks that this is called hacking. She asks why Pion doesn't like them so much, and he claims that he has to hurt people until he defeats the teacher, and the teacher is his mom, the former commander of the night squad in Chiron. The white-haired lady is shocked and realizes there is a boss in training. Pion states with a sad expression on his face that the people of Chiron don't like to lose. However, he doesn't understand. The boy is used to beatings and loneliness, but he's scared to disappoint his mom. He thinks the problem might be that he's not a real Chiron's man and a bad son, which is why his mom treats him this way. Lyra tries to reassure him and claims that there's no way that could be the case. because he has no idea how much she loves him. But the young man does not believe it. Even in burying for his mom in the first place was his father, from such a father she parted. Appa guy is just a burden for her. Babe realizes it's a complicated issue. She can't say something, not knowing enough about Chiron, but she can't turn a blind eye to it either. So she takes the guy's hand in hers and states that it's perfectly fine as long as Lyra treats him, then tells him that defeating the teacher is the way to the goal, Anya is the goal herself, and when he realizes what he really wants, that will be the goal. At that time also, he will work hard to defeat the teacher. In the novel, this is how the young man became a first-class knight for Helen. But now, Pian claims that he doesn't have what it takes to do what he wants to do. The protagonist says that he should find one then, and there's no hurry with that. Lyra says that since the guy has already decided to take a walk, why don't they go for a walk? The sun is shining brightly, a pleasant wind is blowing, and the girl's eyes are fixed on the blue sea. The view is awesome, but the girl doesn't feel very good. Pian asks if she is okay, and if it is possible to remove the seasickness with magic. The young lady says she can, but after 10 seconds she starts to feel nauseous again. Then the young man suggests the option of teleportation, but the protagonist said that it's impossible to teleport where you haven't been. If you try to do that, you can end up in fire and underwater, as the girl has already had such an experience. Pian says that it would be possible to go by wagon, and Lyra wants to say something, but she is seasick. The white-haired lady says that this will not do and suggests that they rest first, so they go to an island nearby. When they finally get off the ship, the protagonist immediately falls to the ground. ID says how much he adores her. The young man sighs and pulls her to him. He puts her head in his lap and tells her that the ground is muddy, so the girl can get dirty. If she wants to lie down, she can do so on him. Lyra says how shy he is, and her favorite is not only cute, but kind. Pian asks how the ship could move if there was no one on board. The young lady claims it's all by magic. You can just point in the direction and it's done. The boy wonders if such a thing is expensive, and the little girl calmly says that it costs as much as 3 locks, but the price corresponds to the goods. The young man now understands why lately many people are fixated on working with magical stones. The protagonist agrees and adds in her thoughts that this is why Helen is trying so hard. Lyra doesn't care because she has money. The girl says that she feels better already and asks what the island is. Suddenly, they hear shouts from the depths of the island, someone shouting orders to stand. It is immediately clear to the guys that there is someone there who is not from this island. At this time, the brown man tries with all his might to escape, but he is grabbed by a large man and claims that the guy made him sweat. He asks if the young man thought he could escape from such a small island, because as soon as he goes to the sea, he will become food for fish. The white-haired lady whispers to her friend that she must save the boy, but Pian tries to stop her because he might be a criminal. The man grabs the boy by his shirt and throws him into a tree, then comes up to him and beats him even more. He asks if the guy, if he thought he was playing the piano, would go back to being an aristocrat, and states that a slave will remain a slave. Lyra looks at the guy and realizes that the man was playing Noel. The little girl can't look at it anymore. Pian tries to stop her because it's too dangerous, but it's too late. The protagonist rises from the bushes and cries out. The man asks who the wench is and who brought her, and the other claims that they didn't have her after all. The young lady assures them that they shouldn't care and tells them to let the boy go and try to become a slave themselves. The stranger lets the boy go and asks the girl what she said, and the other tells her to watch her tongue. One of them clenches his fist and heads straight for her, but he is stopped by the very pianist. He grabs the man by the mogu and asks him not to touch them, for it is his own fault. But the stranger doesn't listen to him and wants to continue what he started. But the other man says that the children look good and they can be sold for a lot. But before that, he wants to do something else and stretches his hand to the protagonist, but Pian jumps between them and wrestles the man's hand away. The same man gets very angry and asks the boy what the boy is yapping about, and if he wants to end his life. After that, he hits the young man on the head. Lyra cries out her friend's name, and he, lying on the ground, covers his head with his hands and tries to reduce the pain. The little girl asks how the stranger dared to hit her pet. She uses wind magic and hurls him into a tree, then quickly disposes of the remaining two. Lyra lifts them into the air, and they start screaming for the girl to let them go and call her a witch. The protagonist asks if they really want it so badly, and if they do, so be it. She throws them to the floor. The musician doesn't understand what's going on or who the girl is. The young lady, meanwhile, approaches Pian and asks how he is. The boy replies that he is in one piece and asks how the white-haired lady is feeling. Lyra replies that it was a simple matter and asks if the boy didn't see her clean up that garbage. The girl says that from now on, Pian can protect me and heals the young man. She then turns to the musician and asks how he is feeling, but he asks if the white-haired lady is talking about him. Lyra says that, yes, and she saw the boy playing in the store. He plays the piano so beautifully. The main character heals the boy and states that now the wound is gone. The boy thanks the young lady, and she asks what they will do with the garbage and points to the men lying unconscious. The young man wonders if the girl is asking him about that. Lyra says that he's a victim, but the guy claims that he became a slave because of his family's debt, so he doesn't consider himself a victim. The protagonist assures her that he's a victim because he tried to escape but got caught. This topic of slaves is so horrifying, and the little girl can't get used to it in any way. She states that she knows it is legal to have slaves here. However, she doesn't think it is right, and she would personally punish them. The young lady, with a serious expression, asks again what the guy wants to do to them. The musician says that they have ruined many people's lives. At the very least, they have exploited children. They have put collars on them and made them their property. The young man asks what the lady thinks he wants to do to them, and he answers his own question. He states that he wants them to die in agony. 3 strangers wake up in the middle of a burning forest. They are tied tightly to a tree. One of them asks what's going on, and realizing the situation, he desperately screams. The boys are already leaving on a ship. The musician wants them to feel the pain for all their sins. When night falls, Pian remembers the words of the protagonist that now he may not protect her. He clutches the railing of the ship. Suddenly, the young man hears a scream behind him. The musician asks why the girl is hovering in the air, and she replies that she is seasick and asks if the boy is hungry. He says that everything is fine, and due to the events he forgot to introduce himself, the young man says that his name is Philip and thanks for the rescue. Pian says that his manner of speech is similar to that of an aristocrat. The musician states that it was 5 years ago. As of today, he has no money, no family, and is a slave with no future. Philip says he doesn't know the young lady's name and asks her to suggest it. Pian is already keeping his ears open, and the girl, having heard the musician call her lady, claims that she is not from such a family. And if you look at it that way, he is older, so there is no need to bother. Philip asks what he should call the white-haired lady then. The protagonist already says the first part of her name, but noticing that Pian is near them and waiting impatiently, she states that she has no name because she is a fairy. And in her thoughts, she adds that just a little more, and it would be the end of everything. Philip thanks the fairy from the bottom of his heart for saving him, and bows. The young lady notices that the musician's reaction is different from that of Pian and his mother. Lyra tells him to ignore it. She did what was necessary. The musician says that only a fairy could say such a thing. The protagonist assures him that perhaps it is strange for local residents to rescue slaves, but where she lived, it is customary. The girl asks if it's wrong, because they are all people and why should anyone be deprived? The boy lowers his gaze and thinks about something, but Pian interrupts his thoughts. He asks why it has suddenly become light. The protagonist already, I suspect what it could be. She walks over to the railing and realizes that it's really what she was thinking. The little girl grabs the 2 boys by the hands and suggests they look too. When they get to the edge of the ship, they see a huge whale. It's the aurora of the sea, Marmel. The white-haired lady is hovering over the water. You claim it is very beautiful, like the sky under your feet. She asks the boys if they knew that seeing her was a 1 in a million chance, and they were very lucky. The musician says that if they are lucky at such a moment, tobacco is unfair. 5 years ago, the Hepburn territory, where the Rowlands ruled, was attacked by brigands. They didn't have a sufficiently trained army to resist them. His father bailed out a castle and hired men, but it was all to no avail. After that, he decided to ask for help from Giryan County. In response, they just prayed every day for victory and drew pictures in the temple, but they did not send anyone to help, and Hepburn had more and more victims every day. Eventually, the boy's father died. It was only after this that the county of Giryan began to send them knights. The brigands, when they saw them, immediately scattered. Pian asks if the behavior of that count is not strange, and in general the fact that the bandits from the sea attacked those on land. Philip interrupts the young man and says that he thought the same thing, but what was more important was that it was over. Without even realizing that this was just the beginning, Giryan County announced that it was his father who had brought the brigands upon himself, and in an instant, Rowlands became a traitor. Lyra asks what about the trial. The young man states that of course there was one, but the father was no longer alive, and the confidants had been plunged into eternal slumber by the brigands. The Rowlands could do nothing, and all the family members became slaves. Philip asks if they now realize that if he had been lucky, all this would not have happened, and he would not have had to endure such treatment. The protagonist is surprised by such words. She thinks what to do. After that, the girl approaches the musician and claims that he is still lucky, because he met a fairy who will fulfill all his wishes. The little girl claims that she will fulfill 3 of his wishes, besides reviving the dead, any of them. But Philip asks what the white-haired lady is going so far for. Lyra says she has no reason and just wanted to help the guy. The protagonist asks if it's not possible. However, the musician says that it's impossible for all of this to happen without a good reason. The girl says that he has lived all these days in slavery for no reason and asks why then something good should not happen for no reason, like today. Then the young man hesitates and asks again about desires. The babe states that she will only grant 3 wishes. His first wish is for a bank where 1 million gold can be used. Lyra is surprised that he doesn't want money, but a bank. The guy asks if it will be difficult. The protagonist replies that no, it will just take time, but it is doable. The white-haired lady asks what his second wish will be. Philip states that he wants the mountains taken away by Giryan County back. Pian asks if they are the same Hepburn Mountains with the magic stones. The musician says they are. The young man then asks why he needs them, since there are all sorts of magical animals there, and it's hard to dig for anything. Philip says that there is something there that is not in other mountains, and the main thing is to find an approach and use for everything. The protagonist notices that the situation is heating up, so she asks what with on the last wish. The boy says that he wants the young lady to save his partner, Rosalina. Pian asks what partner he is talking about if he has a girlfriend, but the prancing boy wonders what kind of girlfriends slaves can have. Partners is the system the slaves work under, in a group of 2. In case one does something wrong, the other will be responsible for the other. Their lives depend on each other. They are connected. The protagonist asks in surprise if the musician has escaped, leaving his partner behind. Philip says that he did not, and he will explain everything now. When they were in slavery, the girl who was paired with the musician showed him that she had stolen a magic stone that serves for teleportation, and they would finally be able to escape. However, the guy claims that the slave traders won't just leave them alone, and if they use it, it will be even more dangerous. He suggests they wait for another chance. The blonde shrieks that then it will be too late, and if not now, she will be sent to Count Giryan's bedroom. Rosalind asks if the boy realizes that she can't leave him. She tearfully asks him to run away. That's how they left the place. However, they used the stone without knowing how to use it properly, so they missed her, and the young man was thrown to this island. Lyra claims that she will destroy the slave trader. Philip says he'd really like to, but it's going to be very problematic because as long as he has the rights to them, then these rogues won't come off. which means the stigma of slaves will be on them for the rest of their lives. The protagonist says she will then buy all the slaves and set them free. But the musician waves his head and argues that it's not that simple. If they are sold, new ones will come in their place, and it can be considered an endless system. In the end, the number of people suffering will be many times greater. Babe thinks and says that they'll leave it for later then, but will deal with his partner for now. The white-haired lady asks where she can be found. The young man says that if she has been caught, there is a high probability that she is now in Hepburn. The protagonist then gets at the helm and asks Pian where Hepburn is. Pian replies that he is southeast of Noel and asks if he can be at the helm. Lyra says he can't. Meanwhile, Philip looks at the young lady and thinks she has incredible strength, angelic looks, and incomprehensible behavior. The girl said she was a fairy. Well, it would be clear to a fool that this is a lie, so the musician wonders if this is a dream. The little girl turns around and turns to Philip. She asks if he is okay with his bare feet. The young man replies that yes, because the white-haired lady cured him, but that's not what Lyra says. She creates a pair of shoes with magic. The girl holds them out to the brown-haired man and claims that it's a bonus. The guy can't believe that there is a man who treats slaves so well too, and wonders if he can believe such a thing. He realizes that he doesn't care who she is, witch or angel, and even if it's all just a dream, he doesn't want to give up this happiness. Philip thanks the protagonist with a sincere smile on his face. After that, they arrive at the island and see 2 guards near the cave. The white-haired lady asks if this is definitely the place, as the guards are kind of weak. Pian says that it is most likely here and there are many people inside, for he can smell different odors. Lyra marvels at the dragon's keen sense of smell. The musician asks the fairy to try not to get into the slaves, because there is a high probability that people are mixed in there. The white-haired lady is so lazy, but she says that she realized she herself does not want to stand out. The girl uses magic, and the 2 guards smell something good and collapse to the floor after a couple seconds. The young lady claims it's sleeping powder and wind magic. The musician picks up the keys and suggests they hurry. They go inside the cave, and the brown-haired man says it's here. The boys see many cages with slaves. The protagonist looks at all this and wonders how many are there. Suddenly, one girl jumps up from her seat and yells to Philip that she is here. The guy runs up to her and tells her how lucky she is to be in one piece. The blonde girl asks how he is. Peony won't let him answer, though. He says he doesn't want to interrupt the joyous reunion, but it's time for them to go. Philip realizes that it is bad for everyone right now. However, he can't save everyone. There are fewer demands on the slaves. Almost all of them are sent to other countries. It still has to be a few months before they come for them again. The musician removes his hood and asks everyone to listen without loud shouting. Now he will open the lock and take his partner. Everyone will want to escape if the locks are open, and he has no rights to stop them. The slaves think the guy will let them out and they can escape. But the young man cuts off all their hopes and asks them not to run away and to stay inside. The men, hearing this, are furious because the guy will only take their partner. They also want to be free. Philip asks where they are going to go if they run away. After all, there are not very many options. It could be the sea where the brigands are, the mountains where the demons are. They can't mix with the common people either. As long as they have collars around their necks, they won't be free. The young man says that to never come back here again, the root of this whole system must be removed. But one of the slaves tells the lad not to make fun of him. He claims that the brat doesn't understand anything because they will be the ones to blame for the guys leaving later. Philip claims that he understands this perfectly well, but for slave traders, slaves are a valuable commodity, and they should not maim them too much. However, Rosalina is his partner, and she was caught after she tried to escape. The girl will certainly not be forgiven for that. The musician says that he understands their feelings and is a slave himself. But nothing will change if you just run away. The young man assures that if they believe in him, he will definitely get them all out of here. But one of the slaves grabs the blonde and asks if the guy is being bullied and how they can believe him. The man claims that if Philip wants to take the girl, he has to take him with him or he won't let her out. Suddenly, someone's voices are heard coming from the street. One of them asks what his coworker is even eating, but the man says he'll be on shift until morning and will probably be hungry. Peng tells them to hurry up, as these men are already approaching, but the slave doesn't want to let the girl go. Suddenly, he gets a blow to the head from behind. The man who hit him throws the slave aside and asks whose he is. He then approaches Philip and asks if he has a plan. The young man says he does, but he can't tell it now. He wants to save them all, but he can't trust everyone. The man says that still the guy can only leave them with promises. Shaitan doesn't know what to say to that. However, the stranger says he can be understood. He pushes the girl closer to Philip and tells him to take it. The young man thanks him, and Pian hears voices and says that they are already here, so they must go. The slave trader wakes up the sleeping guard, asks how much they've been drinking, and tells the man to give him the keys. But when he is about to take them, he notices that there is nothing where they were hanging. The peddler cries out for his colleague to call for help because they have strangers. Pian says they noticed, and Rosalind grabs hold of Philip's cloak and says she's scared. The white-haired lady says she feels like taking everyone out at once and not sweating. The deal was no attacks. The girl tells the blonde to take her hand, Philip to take her shoulder, and Pian to come closer and grabs him by the cloak, then teleports them all out. A slave trader then bursts into the room, but no one is there except the slaves. His colleague claims to have found the keys. One of the slaves asks the other one if it was magic, and he replies that it was, but the man has never heard of such a magician who could teleport 4 people at the same time. By this time, the boys have already returned to the ship. The blonde collapses to the floor. Philip runs up to her and asks if she's okay. The girl starts sobbing and says she thought she didn't have long to live. The musician calms Rosalind down and says she's fine now. Pian says that it looks like more time is needed, and the protagonist agrees with him and asks if he needs to go back, since Mrs. Madeline will be worried. The boy looks a little puzzled, and Lyra asks what's wrong. The young man says he hasn't said anything to anyone. At this time in the Chiron Empire, the servants are wandering around looking for their master. They don't understand where he has gone and think he may have been kidnapped. The boys are sitting in the bushes and realize that everyone has caused such a commotion. The servants continue to call for Mr. Pian. The man with black hair says it's too much of a fuss over one lost boy from Berrien, and his mother is so worried about him. The servant says it's only natural, because he's royalty, and if he awakens as a dragon, he'll be a threat to Mr. Pian. The black dragon grabs his servant by the scruff of the neck and pushes him against the wall. He asks who would be a threat to whom. The servant apologizes and claims it was rude of him, then Paris leaves him and looks out the window. He sees 2 boys there. It's Pian and Lyra. The young man asks his friend what is the best thing to do, and the latter states that he should go back as soon as it gets quieter. The brunette sees that the youngster has brought the girl with him. He smiles and says it's interesting. At this time, the servants say that they have searched the whole place, but there is no trace of him, so the boy is probably not on their property. Madeline orders the rumor mongers to act big, head to the border, and apprehend anyone suspicious. She says she will report it to His Highness. The boys are shocked at this scope. The protagonist tells Pian that it would be better for him to go out now, and he agrees. He rises from the bushes and calls for his mother. The woman is shocked and asks where he's been all this time and what his appearance is. The young boy doesn't know what to answer and looks at Lyra, but she waves her head, showing him not to say a word about her. So the boy replies that he fell asleep at lunchtime. Madeline says with a sucker that they can go. When they leave, the boy tries to say something to his mom, but she slaps him and asks him if he even realizes that he is a member of the royal family and how he is not ashamed. Pian apologizes, and the woman asks if he skipped class today. She suggests that the boy stop acting like that and asks if she hasn't told him how important swordsmanship is to Chiron. The boy replies that he knows. The mother sighs and tells him that if her son is so reluctant, he can quit. However, in return, she will not let him go anywhere unguarded. The young man says he shouldn't, but his mother doesn't let him finish and tells him that he can't even stand up for himself, and all she has to do is guard him like she did when he was a child. Pian clenches his fists. The protagonist sees this, gets up and asks how he is. The girl says that his mother treated him harshly. She does have the temperament of a warrior and mentor. She uses healing magic and tells him to remember that the woman does this because she is worried about him. The young man takes Lyra's hand and states that she always asks if he's okay. The white-haired lady asks if that's true. She then adds that he could easily hurt himself, which is why he does it. Pian realizes his uselessness. He asks if the girl could leave since he would like to talk to his mother. The protagonist agrees, and the boy holds out his little finger and asks the girl to promise that she will come to him. The white-haired lady gives him the promise, and they say goodbye. After that, Pian runs with all his legs to his mother. He is glad that the girl shows concern for him, but realizes that this way she will always treat him like a child. Hey, if nothing changes, if you constantly run away, then nothing will change. The young man is infuriated, but Philip turned out to be right, and he should not run away from problems. The boy catches up with his mother and bows down to her. He apologizes for behaving inappropriately to a member of the royal family and not thinking of the consequences. He states that he doesn't want to be a child who constantly needs to be protected and will never run away again. So he asks his mother to take over his education. Madeline is pleasantly surprised by such words. She tells her son to start by running 100 times around the training ground. The boy asks if he has to do it right now, and his mother replies that yes, and asks if Pian wants to do it, and he immediately says he understands. Watching all this from behind a pillar on the roof is Lyra, who is about to leave and says it's good that everything ends well, but suddenly crashes into someone's chest. When the little girl looks up, she sees a brunette in front of her. Dark hair like tar, there are gray eyes. There is always an intimidating atmosphere around him, and the guy always and everywhere looks attractive. He is one of the characters of the work Dragon and Empire, Black Dragon Paris. The guy smirks and bends over to the white-haired lady. He greets her and calls her Bunny, then asks if she will tell him her name. Not a minute into the acquaintance, Paris immediately asks her name. Bunny thinks how sneaky he is. All she has to do is run, so she quickly teleports away, leaving the brunette alone. The black dragon clucks and says that the girl is definitely a hare, with her speed. The white-haired lady returns to the mansion and realizes that it was very dangerous. She is so tired and already dreaming of the bath that is just filling up. Today, she decides to add lavender. The girl reaches out her hand and creates a magic circle, but suddenly she is pierced by a pain in her chest. The protagonist doesn't realize what it was just now. She ponders whether it seemed to her that her heart stabbed sharply. The next day, at the Hepburn trading post, one man says that this is the main office and they can dispose of it as they wish. He also asks if such a place would really be suitable, though he is only grateful on his part, but to have a new bank built on the site of an old, ruined bank. Philip states that there is no problem, and he is familiar with the old owner. The realtor claims it was a good man. He never thought it would happen like this. After that, they sign a contract. First, the place needs to be cleaned up. The three guys begin to put the room in order. The main character sees that there are a lot of documents on the table. Her gaze stops on the loan statements, and she wonders if there are too many of them. The young lady begins to read the names on the contracts. They are Gideon, Austin, Rollins, the last of which Lyra has heard somewhere before. Philip comes up behind her and takes the document from the white-haired lady's hands. He is surprised that there is still such a thing. 5 years ago, his father borrowed it to hire and knights. The white-haired lady realizes that the guy is very close. When she looks at him, she thinks that he is handsome too, after all. His height is tall. He himself is also slender, just like a model. The guy puts a document on the table and says that the previous owner of the bank didn't really understand the business. That's why he gave his father such a huge sum. He claims that this is the result of this deed. A blonde woman approaches them and says that she is done with the cleaning. The protagonist thanks her for her work and says that now it's her turn. The trio comes to the safe. Rosalina says that at the same time with the cleaning they were searching, but never found anything. The white-haired lady states that it is not a problem and she only needs the space and the rest is up to her. The little girl creates a magic circle and a whole mountain of coins appears from it. She asks if there will be 1 million gold, and the blonde lady says that there is definitely more. Rosalina is surprised at that amount of money, and Philip says under his breath that with that much, the monetary value will drop. Lyra, with her hands full of gold, approaches the young man asking what's wrong. The latter says nothing, for it was his request. After that, the protagonist, with the help of magic, provides Philip with a document confirming that he is the owner of the Hepburn Mountains with their magical stones. The lad asks when she had time, and the white-haired lady says that at first she thought to buy it, but then she just stole it. The young man cries out if it's too dangerous, and the girl says it's okay because they did it in the name of justice, I guess. Shaitan says she's being too optimistic, so Lyra says Rosalina, the return of the mountains with the magic stones and the 1 million gold bank, all his wishes are granted. Babe asks what he's going to do next, if he's going to deal with the slave trade, and tells him to lay it out if there's a plan. You want to get involved too. The young man says, for starters, get the slave traders to buy mountains with magical stones. Lyra doesn't understand why he needs to do that, and the man says it's to put an extra burden on them. These mountains are very expensive, and slave traders' money is slavery. There will be nothing left for them to do but borrow money. Philip says he will lend them the money with low interest, and of course he will take collateral. He pulls back his shirt and points to a collar and says it could be the keys of 1,000 slaves. Babe says that's a good idea, but asks if they would dare to do that. The kid says he thinks they would want to get their hands on the mountains in question. Recently, the aristocrats are increasingly avoiding buying slaves, and ordinary people cannot buy them because the fish are quite expensive. Thus, the need for them among people is gradually decreasing. Of course, abroad it is still customary to own slaves. However, there are many who do not survive the trip on the ship because of disease, lack of water, and many other reasons. Merchants waste a lot of money to feed the slaves, and if they use the mountains with magical stones, they will have an incredible advantage in money. They will be able to use the slaves in mining for treasure. The protagonist snorts her hands and adds that this way they will have a greater opportunity than covering the cost of the slaves. Philip says that's true, so he's sure they'll definitely want to buy. It's the only mountain with magical stones in Berrien that hasn't been used yet. The white-haired lady recalls her friend's words and asks if they didn't say there were a lot of monsters there and it would be hard to dig. The young man says that's why he wants the mountains to be bought by slave traders. He realized this when fighting the brigands 5 years ago. The monsters don't attack the brigands. The girls are shocked by this news and are already hypothesizing that it might be because they look scary, but Philip says it's not like that. He thinks they either have some kind of pact or some other reason. Either way, they'll benefit greatly from the fact that the monsters don't attack the brigands. Because most slave traders are brigands or former brigands, they can easily be mistaken for their own, so the monsters won't be at work. Rosalina asks if there really is such a way. The protagonist remembers that there really is. Because Helen used this object, she did not think that Philip will use it, and this plan is too clever.